High-Speed Rail
Very few
Commission
of us
meeting to
left.
order. Ms. Vaughn, would you please do the roll call?
Mr. Hetty?
I am here.
Mr. Moylan?
Present.
Mrs. Chandler? Here. Mr. Coteau? Here. Chairman Dake?
Here. I'd like to ask you all to stand for the pledge. Mr. Don Cortell, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Has everybody had time to go over the minutes from the previous meeting?
I have a question
Sure.
on the minutes on page 12. Mayor Winger, the third paragraph on that page, it states Mayor Winger felt that the estimate of $3 million was a bad number. He said in an earlier meeting the number was something around $100,000. My recollection is that Mayor Winger said that the $3 million was a good number, not a bad number.
Would you like to have them corrected, Ms. Vaughn?
I will check back in the minutes on that.
Where were you, Don? I'm sorry.
I'm on page 12,
12.
third paragraph.
Yeah.
I had estimated, if you recall at the meeting, I had estimated that the cost of putting in all the mitigation measures to make quiet zones would cost about $3 million.
Right.
And Mayor Winger came up and said, yes, that's a good number. And minutes reflected he said it was a bad number.
Right.
And at an earlier meeting, he said the number was something around $100,000. I don't think $100,000 is the number we're talking about in terms of the cost of doing quiet zone mitigation. That's what we have right now.
Okay. Is our city attorney here? Because I had a quick question on this. I'll ask Ms. Vaughn. Can we approve the minutes now, or should we put it off to the next meeting, since obviously there needs to be some checking?
Yeah, why don't we put it off to the next meeting? I'll bring them back after I've reviewed the tape on that.
All right, we have a consensus to do that, to put the meetings off to the next meeting?
Yes.
That was the previous minutes. Thank you very much.
Should we do all the corrections before we put it off?
Oh, sure, if there's more.
Yeah.
And then I'll bring back to correct him.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Hardy.
Page 2, down at the end, Mayor Winger asked for nominations. At that point, Tammy, you instructed the commission that Scott was just an alternate and therefore not eligible to serve as chair, or you remember that?
I do.
Well, I think that makes more sense to put that in there so it's part of the minutes, so that somebody going back, looking, doesn't wonder why Scott never got any votes for that.
Okay, I'll make sure that's in there.
So that's one. And then on page 4, in the second paragraph, it said that Hetty felt the city needed to be careful about expenditures. Next sentence, they need to look into grants. I think if you go back and you look at the minutes, what I said was, I heard other members of this commission say they need to look into grants, but that I felt that All Aboard Florida was coming in and they should be responsible for their own safety. And the way it reads now, it looks like I'm encouraging looking into grants. That didn't happen. And then down in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph, with respect to Mr. Roberts, it says that I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Roberts, and in order for the city attorney's statements on the next page to make sense, that he clarified Mr. Roberts is not a member of the commission, in order for that to make sense, I think you need to modify that paragraph a little bit, because I said I had to meet with Mr. Roberts, who I understood at the time was a member of the committee. It just wouldn't make sense that comment clarified anything unless the minutes reflect that that meeting It was an understanding at that point that he was a member of the commission. And then, Mr. Chairman, I think if with those changes, then I would agree that we just wait for Tammy to make the changes and approve them at the next meeting.
I'll bring
And
them
if you
back
want
to
a
the next
motion,
meeting.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Heddy. Anyone else with any corrections? All right, we have a consensus that we'll wait to the next meeting. Okay, next order of business, it's number 4, public comment. We'll open it up now for the public to step up and tell us what's on your mind if we have any public comment. Anyone wish to address the commission? Yes, sir, come right up. Please state your name and address for the record. Yes, sir.
My name is Tom Gruber. I'm a winter resident of the area. I live in Indian River Shores. And the only reason I'm here is that I've had extensive experience with railroads in that I come from the town of Cohasset, Massachusetts. And we recently had a restoration of an old rail line that was abandoned in the 50s as a commuter rail service. It went through 5 towns. In our town, it was 2.7 miles long. It had ended up being a quiet zone railroad, and I spent the better part of 3 years working on behalf of the town as an advisor, an unpaid advisor to the mitigation committee in the negotiations with the MBTA, who constructed the line. And then after construction was begun, I was hired by the town to do interface work on behalf of the town and its citizens during the construction project. So I've seen a lot of things and know a little bit about quiet zones and not quiet zones and FEIRs and all the stuff. Our project was considerably different from what you're talking about because it was much shorter. It was 28 miles, although it impacted, I think it was 5 towns. Because it was a government project, as a part of the FEIR, they had to go through the Section 106 historic preservation requirements, which in the Northeast can become extensive. But nonetheless, I've had a lot of experience with quad gates, quiet zones, the things you don't think of. For example, in a quad gate, there has to be a metal sensor in the center of the crossing to detect if a car gets caught between the 2 gates and the railroad, and you have to have enough advance warning for the trains that they can actually stop them before they get to the crossing. So the advance warning when the gates come down on a quad crossing is much greater than it is for a 2-arm crossing because there's no escape. And so things like that you don't think about that become real once you get involved in it. So there's a lot of little details that I've had experience with, and for what it's worth, anybody can come and pick my brain on this stuff. So I just offer my body to your service.
Thank you, sir.
So
Tom, last name was?
Gruber.
Mr. Gruber, in my research, I found some studies that show that quiet zones experience more accidents than those zones with the horn. Do you have any experience, any knowledge?
The service went operational in 2007, and we've had no accidents with one exception, that we have one very, very oblique crossing. And the T managed to mark it in such a way that in times of poor visibility, the edge of the road has what are called fog lines, which is, maybe it's a Northeast term, I don't know, but it's a white stripe at the edge of the road. And it's common at all railroad crossings to have a horizontal white line before you come to the tracks, across parallel to the tracks. Well, in times of poor visibility, people were following, ignoring that and following the fog line to the right and making an oblique turn onto the tracks. And I think we had 5 or 6 cars, including a Corvette, that had gone 20 feet down the tracks, and service had to be suspended and so on. So That was our only accident experience. We had no crossing accidents. We have both quad gates and dual arm gates in our quiet zone.
In your town, the full 2.7 miles was all a quiet zone?
In all 5 towns, it was quiet.
So the entire 28 miles was quiet?
Yes.
So the train never blew a whistle?
Unless it's an emergency. If they sight someone on the tracks or something of that nature, they will blow the horn. But in normal day-to-day operation, there's no horn blowing.
And okay. Do you have any? How fast was that train going?
Up to 60 miles an hour.
So it wasn't a high speed.
Not
it was
high
regular.
speed. No, it's a commuter rail.
Commuter rail
with frequent stops. Our town
No, it was my
had 1 stop. The next town south of us, which was the end of the line, had 2 stops, and so there were probably 5 or 6 stations in the 27 miles.
I'm familiar with Metro North out of New York City. That's the equivalent kind of commuter line.
Yeah, it's a heavy rail system.
Okay.
And Boston and Massachusetts has a very extensive heavy rail commuter system that runs as far as Providence, Rhode Island.
Do you recall the cost in your town for the maintenance of the quiet zones?
Well, the T maintains it all,
Maintains
the whole system.
no cost to the
No
town.
cost. The only thing we're responsible for at the crossings is striping. The signaling and everything was part of their project.
And in your 2.7 miles, were there areas in your town that were significantly the same as Vero Beach in terms of being in a downtown area, or
Much more compacted, much more populated, and any populated area, the rail had to be fenced. Any unpopulated area, the rail was not fenced.
the rail right-of-way had to be fenced?
Yes.
And the fences connected to the gate somehow?
They ran
at
crossing to crossing. There was no absolute preventative of somebody from thwarting a gate and walking around and going on the tracks.
Right.
But if you were passing by the backyard of a home, you had a 6-foot chain link fence that blocked people in that backyard ostensibly from access to the railroad tracks. Although obviously an energetic kid could always climb over it.
And was the fence a result of your advisory commission asking for it, or was that a requirement of the commuter railroad?
Most of the requirements came down via the environmental impact report, and in addition to that, the Section 106 requirements, which add quite a few other things. And the Section 106 from the town, my job and our committee's job was to get the maximum benefit for the town from the railroad. I mean, that was our goal. So by the fact that the historic preservation of Section 106 came in, that was administered by the Army Corps of Engineers, totally independent body, who tends to be entirely different from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Affairs that would rule on the EIR and FEIR. So you've got a combination of people and multiple levels that we could use, quite frankly, as leverage to get certain things.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sure I can't often say this, but I think I'm fairly safe saying it now. On behalf of the entire commission, we really do appreciate these real life experiences, and I know that it helps the heck out of me, and I'm sure the other commission members would
there's a lot of things, unless you've been through it, that you have no awareness of. Lot.
And citizens willing to take their time and to come before the commission is a great thing.
I'm here for multiple months, and I'd be glad to answer questions that anybody might have. Yes,
And
sir.
you'll give to the city clerk a telephone number rather than have it televised. You'll give the city clerk,
Sure.
unless you want to do that.
No,
And,
I'd be happy to.
All right.
All right?
Thank
We
you.
have one more question.
Yes,
Sorry,
sir.
Mr. Eddie. Go ahead, Mr. Candler.
I have one as well, but go ahead.
My,
Jason.
my question was answered through Brian's questions.
Okay,
So
sir.
I appreciate again. I do also appreciate you coming here. One of the things you mentioned is this rail was subsidized, or this rail project, heavy rail commuter, was subject or subsidized by government funding.
It was a government project, a pseudo-government project. The Mass Bay Transit Authority had the project.
Right. So the Transit Authority actually undertook it,
Yes.
but actually is a quasi. It's actually a quasi-government agency.
Yes, it
It's not-
is.
Yeah. I believe
Yes.
So. Okay. And the trigger of the 106 actually came as a result of accepting government funding.
That's a requirement for a government project to go through the 106.
Now, as regarding the fencing, because that's obviously something that this committee probably needs to take a look at as we go down whether we want quiet zones, and also if we have quiet zones, obviously the fencing becomes, when you have a train coming through at possibly 80 to 90 miles an
Yes.
hour, fencing may be the actual real thing that we need, whether we have quiet zones or not. Was any of that fencing intact, or was that actually a project under the, in your town of 2.7 miles, that was installed new as a result of
The railroad was totally abandoned in 1953 or 54 when they built Route 3 from Boston to the Cape. They figured they'd built this superhighway and there was no need for commuter rail any longer. And so they totally abandoned it, and the town bought the right-of-way for the most part. So the town actually owned it, and they had to negotiate to buy it back from us.
Now, was that fencing installed as a result from the 2007 initiation of this project?
Yes, it was installed as a part of the project. Wherever there was a population adjacent to the tracks, a home, it was fenced with 6-foot galvanized chain link fence. If it was in what under the Section 106 turned out to be a historic district, it had to be black chain link fence. And where the railroad went through the historic center of our village, it had to be wrought iron.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else from the public to speak? Hearing none, we'll close this portion.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
could I just ask Tammy, usually when a member of the public speaks, there's a notation in the minutes that he spoke, but I think the gentleman made enough good points that if you could just include some of the major points that he made in the minutes, I think it'd be helpful for the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hetty. We're on number 5, Chairman's Matters. We talked the previous meeting on a working list of items that need to be addressed. Did you all get the paperwork that I sent you on the quiet zone? There was quite a bit of reading there. That was what I would like to address, that paperwork at the next meeting. Did everybody get it? Yes. Okay, good. That's what I wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. All right, what I heard today, we'd like to get some information on fence. The other thing I would like to know is the speed that the train is actually going to be coming through this town. Then also the sound of the horns. What do they actually sound like? So at our next meeting, these are some of the things that I'd like us to take a look at. I'm going to do the research on where we can find out the sound of the sound that this train is going to make, the speed going through our town, and then some more information on the fencing. The other thing that I read in some of the materials that I've looked over so far, the rail company is doing an environmental study, and I'd like to find out from the company, and I'll send them a little note to let us know where they're at with that environmental study, and when can we get a chance to take a look at it, and will this city have any input? Anyone else have something to add to this working list in progress?
Well, on your speed question, Mr. Roberts is here. He can probably answer that question.
Okay, I'm going to hold because let's wait because he's
okay.
coming up.
Okay, and the same for the sound. And I'm not 100% sure, but and again, maybe Mr. Roberts can answer this question. But is there a different horn for a passenger versus a freight? Cargo.
Actually, what I'm looking for, Mr. Hetty, is in what I've been doing a little bit of research. I'm finding out when that horn goes off, you hear it, and it's going to be heard very well. What I'm looking for, and I don't want to get into it today because that's for our next meeting because we got quite a bit to cover here, is what does it sound like? I'm looking for a recording so we can play it.
Actually, I have that on my hit list of things to ask for, and I was going to again ask Mr. Roberts if he either A, has a recording of what that sounds like, or if he could provide one, or if he could give an address of an intersection that we could either go to or individually. I'm not sure whether there's any intersections in the state of Florida with high-speed rail.
Okay, and
We don't
right,
want
when
any
he
of
comes
these.
up, if you could
Okay.
ask then, what I'd like to do, because Mr. Falls has to be somewhere, let's say for the record, Miss Kim Delaney could not make it today. She had to take care of some personal situations. Next is B, Mr. David Curry, our Chief of Police, Vero Beach City. Would you please come up and address us?
I have a question first.
Go right ahead, sir.
I wanted
Go.
to add something to your list. This is going to
Yes.
be a little bit off the wall,
Okay.
but given all the costs that seems to be associated with changing all of the crossings, in putting a lot of money in, has anybody ever considered what they've done in a number of other areas, in urban areas with railroads, is they elevate it. It's only 2.7 miles. Elevate the railroad through there. We've had no crossings. We'd have no costs. We'd have no maintenance issues. Long term, it would be, given the initial cost might be higher, but I was wondering if somebody could give some thought to what that might cost.
Okay.
And that's not off the wall. That's one of my questions.
Ah,
Well, maybe that makes it off the wall. Never mind.
you said it. I didn't hear.
Chief, if you would.
Good afternoon, Commission. I was asked to provide you a report of accidents within our railroad crossings and intersections in the city limits. And we have 6 since 2010, so it's fairly insignificant as far as incidents go. I can just briefly go over those real quick for you.
If you would.
We've had 2 at the 60 eastbound tracks. One of them was an individual that was stopped at the railroad crossing for the train. He was under the influence of a controlled substance. This was in the 2 a.m. hour. And he was stopped, moved forward a little bit and hit the arms, then moved forward a little bit more, and the train took out his front end. Again, that wasn't the fault of the train. Of course, that was the driver. And we also had another incident at eastbound 60 where a vehicle, again, was waiting for the train at the arms, and a vehicle rear-ended that car. So they were stopped and waiting, and someone from behind wasn't paying attention, something like that, and rear-ended them. So that was 2 from eastbound 60. Then we had 1 from westbound 60 where an individual, again, was stopped at the tracks waiting for the train to finish, and the vehicle was in neutral, and they rolled back and hit the vehicle behind them. The next, we had a group of individuals that were in a vehicle, and they were northbound on US 1, and for some reason they decided to make a wide U-turn to maybe go back south, and it was so wide that they went into the railroad tracks at 24th and 1. So they made, again, a real wide turn. These individuals were under the influence as well, at least the driver was. So, again, that wasn't right at the tracks, at the crossing, but that was right north of 23rd Street crossing. And then we had a lady that was on her way to the hospital one morning at the Aviation, 32nd Street, US 1, and she was waiting again for the train to go by. The train finished. The arms didn't go up yet. She was in a bit of a hurry and went forward, and the arm smashed her windshield out. And then, so I believe that's the 6 incidents that we had since 2010.
Prior to 2010, I remember at least one pedestrian that was crossing. You remember how long ago that was? If not, Tammy's got.
Well, we've had a number.
Memory like a trap. How long ago was that, Tammy? Remember that?
I know two.
Remember that.
Huh?
There are 2 that I can.
2 that you remember.
Yeah.
You don't remember
Just
when?
walking across or suicide?
Yeah. Well,
I
Hard
can
to
tell you,
tell.
I've worked individually. I've worked suicides on the railroad track,
I think
and I was
Mr.
just going to
Mr.
add to that.
King
But
was next.
yeah.
That would have been 1996, maybe.
That's what I'm thinking, 96,
And then that
97,
homeless guy,
somewhere
it
in there.
was, I mean, certainly there were some rumors about suicide too, but I don't,
I worked a number of. One was around the '96 year, and it wasn't at the crossing. It was behind Kmart, but it carried into the city there
Right.
at the 16th Street.
right, it was behind
Yeah,
Kmart.
I worked
right.
that as a detective sergeant at that time. Not vehicular related. Again, individuals, unfortunately, wanting to take their lives.
So in a 10-year
we have-
period, then we can come up with,
3 or 4.
Not that
Another-
many, yes. And again, not more on the fault and solely on the fault with this report anyway of the driver, not the train.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, in all these instances, only one instance where a train actually struck a vehicle.
Right, and again, that was
All the others
individual that-
were off. Were not associated with the train at all.
correct, just at the intersection.
Right.
And again, the individual slope kept rolling forward, and
And
unfortunately,
the individuals were involved with the train collision. Well, the train didn't just hit cars, it hit those,
Well, the ones that were suicide. That's basically a sure thing. If a lot of suicide attempts, but it's a sure thing if you jump in front of a train that's going 50 or 60 miles.
probably
an
going
hour.
to get you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief, for your
You're welcome.
time.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Okay, next on our list, 6C, Mr. Falls, our Public Works Director. Please address us.
Thank you, Chairman. Monty Falls, Director of Public Works. I've got some information that I've tried to put together based on some questions you asked last meeting, which I wasn't able to attend, but from the minutes. And there were several questions asked. The crossings inside the city limits, the city has jurisdiction over 5 of those, and those would be the ones from 21st Street north. The crossings at State Road 60, which I'm assuming you're considering as one crossing, but there's an eastbound and a westbound. That's the DOT, and the 16th Street is Indian River County. Mr. Hetty asked, he didn't recall seeing a line item in the budget for maintenance. He's exactly right. That traffic maintenance of those signals at the crossings are in our signal maintenance budget. Those, along with our annual license fees, run us about $16,000 a year
Total?
total.
And that's all 5?
That's all 5. Some of them have very old agreements. You don't generally get charged updated prices until you do a major project at one. I think I've heard said that this work will not amount in any new agreements, that the old agreements would stand firm, and I'm hoping to get that confirmed so we can build our budgets accordingly. There was a question asked if diesel fuel contained.
Before you get off of
Sure.
the crossings, 21st Street North, what about 16th or 17th Street?
That's Indian River County maintains 16th Street, even though it's in
Even
the
though
city
it's
limits.
in the city limits?
It's their right of way.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Hetty asked about the components in diesel fuel, if there was any lead. From the research I found, there's no lead in the diesel fuel.
And if I could interject, I'm
Sure.
sorry for interrupting you, for the rest of the commission to think about, since that's under the county jurisdiction, 16th Street, we're going to probably have to get a hold of them to see if they want to work with us, because if the quiet zone situation goes through, will we find the money to do the other quiet zone, leaving one out is not going to do us any good. So that's something we're all going to have to think about.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe that's the same for the Florida Department of Transportation.
Yeah, I think your concern is if you're going to recommend the quiet zones and move forward, if we find money, it would be for all the crossings inside the city, no matter whose jurisdiction it was. So that would be the 8
Okay.
individual crossings,
8?
counting 2 at each way on 60.
All right, so we have a total of 8.
Question,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go right ahead.
You say that right now the county and the state are responsible for the ongoing maintenance of those crossings.
They have been.
They're paying their
past.
share.
Yes.
So we already established.
We haven't been paying those.
We haven't been paying those. Theoretically, if the city, if we upgrade the quiet zone and there were additional things going there, that they would continue to maintain those, or we'd have to have new agreements with the county, or do we have agreements with the state and the county for that?
We have agreements for the ones that are under our jurisdiction. I'm assuming they have similar agreements with the FEC on those that are their jurisdiction.
So we have no responsibility for maintaining those
Those are
three.
not our roadways.
No, our roadways.
That's correct.
Okay. So if we were to, if the city council decided it wanted to make an investment and have quiet zones, they would have to get permission then from the state and from the county in order to make those improvements, I presume.
I presume so, and I presume if there was any additional costs that, since we were the ones asking for it, we would be responsible for it if the others jurisdictions didn't want to make those improvements.
And Wayne is sitting back there, I think. If we ask for the improvements, then does that put the city on the hook for the liability? Okay.
One of the other things, and David, can you turn this on? One of the other things that was asked was some traffic count information.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're going to pull it up. It's going to be hard to see, but I've made copies for everyone. Ryan, if you can take one down. And this is the cost data that we've got summarized for you. So pass those down, and there'll be a copy for the press there when you get to the end. But we've got a map up here that shows you the area and the crossings from, and I did all this assuming a train traveling in the direction from south to north, and I gave you the links between crossings, and also you'll see a distance of a quarter mile, and I think that quarter mile is what's called out as the area where they have to blow the horn if they're traveling in excess of 60 miles an hour. So it gives you that information. It gives you the traffic counts at the crossings. And I put a table on the bottom of that shows you at different speeds how far a train is going to go in a second. And I've got another table for you that you can look at your leisure that would show you how fast the train would go through each of those segments. But a train traveling at 100 miles an hour, and assuming a 900-foot long train, would go through the city limits in 90 seconds, from the start of the train entering the city limits to the back of the train exiting the city limits. So it gives you some kind of feel for it's not going to be here very long. You're not going to have a lot of visual warning. At a train traveling at that speed, you're going to really rely on those gates being down to keep someone from, getting on the track. It's not going to be like anything we've experienced here in the past where the freight trains are going through, I'm guessing top speeds around 50. I don't think I've seen much above that. So it's going to be a big change for us, and those safety improvements, whatever we choose, we're going to really be relying on those at those speeds. So.
Which one? Your bottom number is 75.9 seconds. I came up with 71. I think your number is probably closer to correct. But I like your chart better than my scribble, but it's
And again,
interesting. 75 seconds. I had 71, so.
Well, we're in the engineering world, that's pretty close.
Sounds exact.
But this is assuming a train traveling south to north. I didn't take the time to do one going the other way. It's not a whole lot of difference. So that's a lot to digest. If you want to ask any questions, or I'll be back at all the rest of the meetings to try to answer those. But I wanted to give you that information so you could have that to think about and as we move forward. One of the things that I did see looking through the minutes is that the Public Works Department would have to come up with the estimates for the cost on the quiet zones. It's been my experience anytime we worked with the FEC or with a consultant doing a roadway project that had an FEC crossing, we always contacted the railroad. They gave us the cost of the improvements and the cost of the design. We didn't have any input. We took that cost and built it into our project. It would be my recommendation, if there's funding secured for quiet zones wherever it comes from, is that we approach the company that's doing the design and ask them to do this design for us. It makes no logical sense to me for us to engage a consultant to work with them to do it. Let them do the design, let them do the construction, tell us what those incremental costs are, and then we'll have a number to work with. That's the way we've done it in the past. If this is something new, it's something real new for me. So that's the conclusion of my comments. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions. One other thing, you'll see on that chart of the cost, the capital improvements that were done over that time period that's included there. Typically what happens is the railroad will notify us at least a year in advance that they have a capital project coming up. It gives us time to work that into our budget for the next fiscal year. It doesn't always give us time to plan through the expense, but it gives us time to react to it and have it in our budget. So,
And this is a one-year sheet, right?
well, you'll see, Brian, the dates when the expenses occurred over on the left. I think the left-hand side of the page.
Yeah, I said 1 year. I'm sorry. This is from 3 to.
If you'll see the dates at each of these intersections, that's when things happened. But
Right.
the summary at the bottom is the summary for this past year's annual expenses, the ones that are bolded. And that's the $7,200 for signal maintenance and the $8,700 for license fees. And that's what we budget for in our.
So the public that's watching and don't want to read a chart, the answer to the question about annual cost is, our experience is $7,239 plus $8,694.
Yeah, but I can tell you, when we were designing the Aviation Boulevard project, because we were going to widen that intersection, it was going to trigger a new license agreement, which would have a new annual lease payment and a new signal maintenance fee. So anytime you initiate a project that improves, you're subject to those increased fees. And you'll see when you look at that chart, not all those intersections are we paying license fees or maintenance fees on.
And to your best of your recollection, the numbers reflected here for this year are not unusually low. This is pretty typical for a year?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
One other thing, as you talked about the possibility of trying to make a decision if one crossing could be closed to use that money to offset some of the cost, I looked at the angled crossing at 14th Avenue. We also looked at the crash history where 14th intersects St. Lucie at that oblique angle. There were only 2 in 6 years. I know there's a lot more near misses, but there were only 2 recorded accidents. So that'll just give you that for your information.
Wow.
I would have thought more too, but the records are what they
Heck,
are.
I had more close calls than that today at that intersection.
I think the police chief's left. I don't want to let him know about your
That's how I
driving
drive a
habits.
car. It's got government plates.
We have one more question
Yeah.
from Mr. Falls. Go ahead.
Yeah, Monty. Along the route, railroad track basically is right along Route 1 in the right-of-way of the state right-of-way there. If we had to add an extra gate on the Route 1 side, I don't think there's room. I'm not an engineer, but I've driven by there and thinking of putting another gate, especially where we're 23rd, 26th, 21st. There's just not enough room there without impinging on the state right-of-way.
I think what happens is the crossing gate goes down across the direction of travel.
Yeah.
Then the other one goes across from the other way on the direction that you're not supposed to travel to keep you from driving around it. So the gates, I think that's what they do.
Well, that already exists on the
It's
State
on
Route
the-
60.
On State Road 60, where it's one way,
Yeah,
you're taken care of.
right. On
But
both
on-
sides.
But on the two-way travel, you
Well,
would.
that's why I'm curious as to why we'd have to do quads on, on State Route 60, because that was the biggest, estimated increase in cost was State Route 60. And if the quad grade is having both of the sides covered, it seems to be already done there.
And that might be a question we could get answered as we look at more of the specifics when we would ask
Right.
to have this work designed and give us a firm price.
Okay, so it's not adding another gate outside. It's just making sure that both sides are closed.
I'm not a railroad engineer.
Okay, I'm not either.
So I want to find out the answers to those questions, but I wanted to give you the information that I had today.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Foles.
that.
I have a-
Don,
as soon as
there's-
you're done, Mr. Edding.
Mr. Chairman, Don, there's no gate for the railroad on Route 60 if someone were traveling down that street the wrong way?
I think that's probably what would have to happen is you would have to have them on both sides of the road.
Oh, there's a gate on the other side. It's just not quite, I think.
There's a gate on eastbound. They're
Right.
both to stop westbound traffic.
Okay.
But I think when you have the quiet zone, there has to be one on the opposite side of the roadway as well.
Okay,
Keep
so that's what
someone
we're
traveling,
talking. Okay.
but that's still questions I'm looking for answers for.
Thank you.
I'll drive by that again.
I have a question for our city attorney, Mr. Wayne. Please come up. Question on quiet zones. We are told we have a total of 8 going through the city. County control, DOT control. Do we have to get their permission to have a quiet zone there? And let's say, and let me back up a little bit here, we find the funding for all 8 zones. Do we have to have the permissions of those 2 entities to do a quiet zone?
I'd certainly suggest it. And the railroad's going to make the improvements without the right-of-way owner, so to speak, saying it's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, along the lines of the quiet zones, this is, wanted to just have a quick little discussion here on this. With the quiet zones, since this is moving very quickly, and we're working on a tight time frame here, I'd like to, in the very near future, find out who will actually do the designs for us, where we can start assigning some costs. So to move this forward, to ask our state legislators for help with funding, we need to have some numbers. So in the near future, we're going to bring this back to the table so we can get some concrete answers. If the rail company is not going to help us with the designs, that's the way it is. We need that on record.
Mr.
Then we have
Chairman.
to find an engineering company to do it for us.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
If I may, what I believe Mr. Falls suggested is as an economy of scales thing and through his history, I believe any time that the rail company has endeavored to take on a project, we have piggybacked or utilized their same engineer.
Yes.
And again, it's economy of scales wise, although I think what the statement was possibly before, we can ask Mr. Roberts to clarify it.
Okay.
But what I believe his statement was is that we would be responsible for the costs incurred. But what Mr. Falls, what I believe he was stating was, again, as economy of scales, that we would piggyback on that, and it makes more sense to do that. So I guess we'd be asking Mr. Roberts to identify who's their engineering company that they anticipate to make these improvements in what he had said by the year end of 2015. So I'm certain that they have somebody that they're already identified.
And we also, with that being said, if you can keep your thoughts when he comes up, who will pay for those design costs, because they're going to be extra design costs. And we need to find out who's going to be picking up the tab for that, and how do we actually initiate that to start moving it so we can take a look at some paperwork.
Mr. Chairman, I just
Good.
want to echo that, I see absolutely little to gain by us having anybody other than Mr. Roberts and his
Agreed.
organization doing the engineering studies. It's their railroad, it's their safety. It's I wouldn't want to see anybody other than them do it. And I think that as far as the engineering costs are concerned, that there's enough numbers out there that we would know whether or not they were charging us or overcharging us. But I also think from a liability standpoint that we want the railroad to be doing this. We want them to make sure that the railroad is going through the intersections in a properly designed, one that they designed. So we could.
And you're absolutely right. I don't have a problem with that. What I'm looking for is, are they going to do it? Are they willing to do it? And then the cost. Go ahead, Mr. Foley.
But rather than put this off, I think it's something that you can pretty well resolve right now with consensus of this board, that we tell them that we would like them to do the engineering studies.
Mr. Falls?
Let me point out one thing. My experience with the railroad has been they're very good about knowing their business and knowing what these things cost. This sheet that I gave you, you can see a column over toward the right that says budget amount for the rehab. That's the number they gave us. And then the actual cost of the project, which was crossing rehab. All of those numbers, the actual costs were a little less than what they gave us for a budget number. So if we can get a budget number from them for the quiet zones, I would feel comfortable that number would be a good number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Chairman, if I may.
Go right ahead.
I understand my fellow committee members' comments regarding the hope to have the rail pay for this, but I think we have to be practical in understanding that I believe, and I would defer to the city attorney on this, I don't know of any action which this committee can take or the city can take to prevent the rail from utilizing the line in the manner which they seek to utilize it. And so as much as I wish we could sit here and say we want the rail to pay for all these things, I think we also have to be practical, that we have to be prepared to come up with a feasible solution outside of just hoping that the rail is going to pay for this. I mean, in my mind, hope may just be a place in Arkansas in that respect. I don't see, again, that the rail is going to come forward as much as we can urge them to do that. And I think we need to be prepared to offer the city commission what we believe are possibilities of paying for it. And I think, one, we've already taken that step in the resolution, but we also may have to look at that as a hard.
And Mr. Roberts was pretty clear in his presentation at the last meeting that is our responsibility and we pay for it. I got that loud and clear.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
One of the responsibilities of this commission is to make a recommendation to the city council whether or not they should embark on a quiet zone and what the cost is. I don't feel comfortable making that recommendation unless I have some idea from the city administration as to what that impact might have on the finances of the city. A project like this can be funded out of capital money, can be bonded, a number of other ways in which it can be paid for. If it's paid out of general funds, it's going to have an impact on the tax rate. And I think that part of our deliberation should be, as our recommendation is, as we get input from the public, right now the public hasn't heard much about this yet, so they haven't showed up to tell us, would be what is going to be the impact, the financial impact on the city. And we need that information as well, I think, before we can make a recommendation.
Mr. Chandler? Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I think that it probably should be, for the record, everyone know that the City Council did adopt a resolution requesting that the state fund the cost of improvements for quiet zones.
Well, if the state doesn't do that, I mean, we could take the position that we can recommend quiet zones as long as the state pays for it. That's not helping. We have to be realistic in terms of what is the ability of this city to cover this cost, and what is the impact going to be on the community if the noise is there.
I don't disagree. I just wanted the minutes to reflect that we all understand that last night the City Council took action on this.
And yes, they did, and we were very fortunate that all the council members agreed with the resolution that we recommended. And we heard that the last presentation from the railroad folks that they are moving forward with their project, and we are working on a very tight window of time. And to get any funding, if it's at all possible, from the state level to federal level, that takes a number of months. What I'm hoping we can do here in the next couple of meetings is get this squared away, because they go into legislation here, I think, in March, Tammy? And then we can move this along if we have some concrete help from the City Council. They can carry the paperwork forward to the legislators to help us. with funding. If we don't have anything to show them, we lose that window of opportunity. Next up, 6D is Mr. Rusty Roberts, Florida East Coast Industries, all aboard Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't come with any additional presentation. I gave pretty much everything I needed to say in terms of outlining the project last week. You've actually, I think you're headed on the right track. You've got some great experts discussing the various components that you're concerned about, and I think they gave you some excellent information, probably better than I can give. The police department gave a report on the accident rate in the area. The speed, the public works director gave a report on the speed and the time it takes to go through the city. I know that was one of the questions asked of me last week, and he did his research and is a pretty accurate description.
Okay, thank you.
Glad to answer any other questions that you may want to ask.
Members, questions?
One of the questions that Mr. Hetty brought up was the willingness of your agency to work with the city in providing engineering and other estimates.
Well, again, going back to the federal regulations on quiet zones, it's fairly clear that the local governments are responsible for planning, design, implementation of quiet zones. The railroad could do constructions and often does do constructions at the city's or county's request because we're in there doing the work anyway, and then the city or that local municipality pays for that portion of the cost. We have engineers that are looking at the crossings now, deciding on the scope and the costs for the safety upgrades that we have to do, but that does not include the cost of quiet zones, and right now they are not charged with doing so. Whether or not, I think the question was asked whether we could use our engineers, the railroad's engineers, to do that kind of work, and that's something I will take back to the company and ask. There would be a fee for that. If we were to do additional engineering work, I'm sure there would be an additional charge for that. But I don't know. Right now, our engineers are not doing studies that would qualify for quiet zones, only for the safety requirements that we are required to do by the FRA.
You would go back and see if there's a willingness
Right,
to
so
do that with us.
That's two concrete questions, if you would please, sir.
Yes.
Go back to your company and ask, are they willing to help us with the designs and do everything that needs to be done and the cost? And we'd like to know that at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine the railroad wanting to put a whole lot of money traveling at 100 miles an hour down through intersections that they aren't confident have been engineered properly. And I don't believe for half a second that the company that wants to put this railroad through doesn't have engineers who are familiar with this particular type of design work. I understand we're responsible for paying the bill, but I wouldn't want to be part of deciding which engineer we were going to pick. I don't want to pick one of our favorite engineers to do something that is not something, not an engineering firm that has your blessing.
Well, there are many engineering firms that do this kind of work. The MPOs in the further south are undertaking that now. Railroads are not charged with implementing quiet zones, so we have not practiced that in the past, and that's not part of our requirements under the federal regulations. So we do not do studies for quiet zones, have not, and so I would not say that we are experienced in that regard. We are experienced in safety upgrades that are required for all grade crossings.
In your last presentation, you talked about some of the bridges that you're involved in. Where are you building bridges?
In various places. I could not outline exactly where they are.
And the bridges that you're involved in, who's picking up the cost for the bridge?
The railroad. The railroad is paying for the infrastructure that we are putting in our corridor.
Okay. And the bridges that you're involved in, are these railroad bridges, or are these traffic bridges over the railroad? Or are they both?
We're not building traffic bridges over the railroad.
So these are all strictly railroad bridges. And do you have, this is not a good question, but anyway, do you have any idea what a bridge on a 4-lane highway over? No, you don't.
No, sir, I'm not an expert in these kinds of questions.
But in following that up,
Yes, sir.
could you come back to us any estimates that the company would have for putting a 2.5 mile bridge, elevate the railroad through our downtown, eliminate 7 crossings,
But in Elton.
and what have you. I mean, one of the things that is done in the north is a huge amount of money is spent every year eliminating grade crossings. The biggest safety thing you can do for a railroad is to eliminate where a road crosses it. So a lot of bridges are built, a lot of areas are elevated, or roads are going below the railroad. That is something that in the South, because Florida is so flat, we don't do that much of. But we do have, Route 1 gets crossed. The railroad crosses Route 1. There's a bridge, down south of us a little bit. Eliminating grade crossings, especially where they're all so very close together, to me, would be the greatest step we could make toward improving safety. Automatically, it's a quiet zone because nobody can, no car can get up there. And I don't know what the cost would be. Has the railroad done any estimate or evaluation of that as an alternative course?
Not to my knowledge, but the city or the county, whoever is where a grade crossing is located, has the option to request that crossing be closed.
And Mr. Roberts, when you go back asking your company the questions, in the event that there is no help available through your company with the engineers that you're using for the engineering studies that are going to be needed for the quiet zones, if you could let us know what they're doing in other cities, what engineering firms that they're using that are familiar with the quiet zones that will pass the federal regulations. That would be helpful for our next meeting.
I'm sure Kim would have been able to tell you that, answer some of those questions if she were here today.
Right,
She
and
probably
it is
has that information.
Thank you. It is our hope that Ms. Delaney will be here at the next meeting. Any other questions from the members?
To follow up on Don's a little bit, can you come back to us with a couple of ballpark estimates? We already know that from your last presentation that you're going to run one track all the way through the city, an additional track, and that has a cost to it. Can you give us that cost so that we know what the difference is between that cost and Don's suggestion that we put an L in?
I doubt I could do that. I doubt I could do that in the very short period of time you're requesting. It would take an involved engineering study to do that. It would be costly. I'm not sure that the company is looking at elevating any tracks.
Okay, so the elevated, to put an L in, those numbers aren't readily available, but the cost for the track through Vero Beach, that's a number you know. It's in one of your budgets someplace.
It most likely is, yes, sir.
And even if it weren't, I'm sure there's some smart guy in your organization that knows what it costs for, 2.3 miles, Monty?
Yeah, 2.3 miles from where the tracks cross the city limits.
That number should be off the top of somebody's head.
Any other members have any other questions at this time for Mr. Roberts? Ms. Chandler, go right ahead.
Yes, Mr. Roberts,
Yes, ma'am.
in between the last meeting that we held and today's meeting, have there been any other communities that you know of that have stepped forward to have similar bodies address quiet zone issues?
The city of St. Lucie Village, town of St. Lucie Village, is looking at that. They passed a resolution last month asking for state assistance. I've not seen the resolution. I just was told they did that.
And I don't mean just those who are asking for assistance from the state.
Oh,
but
asking us?
but looking at this issue in general.
There are many more communities south of us that are looking at quiet zones, certainly in pretty much all of Palm Beach and Broward County. Miami-Dade County is not looking at quiet zones right now. There are some areas in Martin and St. Lucie, but I could not characterize to what extent that they're looking.
City of Sebastian?
I can let you know after I speak to them tonight.
Oh, okay.
And the small town that you named in St. Lucie County, that's what, a mile and a quarter?
Small town, they have a
It's a
few.
very small town on Dixie Highway there.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Roberts, a couple people had asked just a kind of a practical question regarding the sound of this horn. Could you confirm with possibly somebody whether there's a consistent sound that you guys make? I believe under the FRA, there's a decimal level that it has to emit. But could you just find out whether there's one consistent horn they use, or could it be different horns all emitting the same decimal
no
level?
one's asked that before. I've assumed that it was the same sound you're hearing when the freight train goes by. I assume it's the same type of horn. I might be wrong. No one's asked. The decibel levels are prescribed in the FRA regulations between 96 and 110 decibels. But
if you could inquire that,
yeah,
I mean,
sure.
that's a curiosity that I think a lot of people would like to know. If you
Right.
could commit to a horn sound, that would be great.
And, yeah, in other words, what kind of horn's going to actually be on the high-speed train? It could be
If we know.
right now, probably what you're hearing, but that's a great question. I'll ask him.
the last meeting that you were here, Mr. Roberts. You had said that the train is being built as you were speaking.
Well, no, it's not under construction yet.
Yet the train.
Certainly the planning.
What about
You
the
mean
en-
the car, passenger cars, the
The,
vehicles?
the engine.
Oh, the engines, there's discussions going on with the manufacturers, potential manufacturers.
Who's the potential manufacturer?
That is, we're negotiating with several companies.
In or out of the United States?
We're negotiating with several companies.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I got one quick question.
That means out.
What's in your negotiations, your company, when they...
Mr. Hetty, those trains will be built in the United States.
Well, that was the question. Thanks for the answer.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
What's the date and year that the trains will actually, where your company has to have them to be built? In other words, what's their time frame?
Well, we're still looking at beginning revenue service either in late 2015 but early 2016. So that's the time frame that we're hoping to be operating.
Okay. Thank you.
You indicated that we'd have the same horn sounds for this train as we have for the freight trains. Is that correct?
I assumed so until the question was asked.
The freight's, by recollection, I don't hear that horn blaring all the time when the freight's going through town.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Well, I'm not sitting beside the track. I understand, but I've also been at crossings at various times when the train's going through, and I can't recall hearing much of a horn either to the next intersection down or one and back, and we don't have that much distance between them.
Well, I was here last week, and I was standing right next to the corridor when a freight train went by, so I heard it.
Okay, it did.
Yeah.
It does go by.
Yes.
All right, that's fine. Because right now it looks like it's taking 3 minutes for the head of a freight train to go through the city. The thing's a lot longer, so the whole train takes a lot longer, and it would take a minute and a half basically for.
We're about 72, 75 seconds.
Yeah, that's what that's if it's going 110 miles an hour through the city. You're planning on sending a train 110 miles an hour through our city? I think the last time you stated it would be somewhat less than that at various times, especially in populated areas.
Last time I stated I wasn't sure because I had not
Okay.
seen the speed charts that we're developing, and I think those are still under development. But we'll be traveling at a very close to that speed, I would think, through here.
Okay, thank you.
With that being said, the charts that you just mentioned, when would they be available for us to take a look?
It's a fluid process, Mr. Chairman. But I'll ask.
And could you give us a kind of an answer at the next meeting about how long it would be down the road before we
Sure.
can actually see the charts is what I'd like to know.
Well, what you want to know is the speed we're planning through this city, and I'll
Through our city of Vero Beach,
pin that
correct?
down.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest to the committee that we have to think of the worst case scenario, which would be the top speed that Mr. Roberts has indicated.
Yes. Any other questions for Mr. Roberts? Thank you, sir,
The
for coming.
speed that this train is capable of, and I understand you're talking with companies and their design and whatnot. You have any idea at all what the train that you envision, the speed that can actually attain? What's the maximum? Will it do 200 miles an hour if you want it to?
I would doubt so, but I can't speak to the capability of the locomotives. I do know that the speed we want to reach on our east-west corridor, that's from Cocoa to Orlando Airport, is about 125 miles per hour. So we are capable of going those speeds. We will not be going faster than that. So I don't know that that's a question we need to ask.
And the numbers that have been tossed around using the number of hours and the total number of trains, you hear repeated often every half hour. But if you're leaving on the hour from Orlando and leaving on the hour from Miami, aren't we halfway or so between? So is it possible that the trains running through the city of Vero Beach really will be once an hour and they're 4 minutes apart?
Same time. That's probably going to happen somewhere in the corridor. I'm not sure where that would happen. You're probably pretty good guess.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Roberts.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks for
Mr. Roberts, could you give us that information? Could you come back to us with with that frequency of where the trains would be crossing and how close we are to that point?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I want to bring to the Commission's attention the following. West side of the tracks, I've had a number of folks contact me that are elders. People are concerned with the high-speed rail and also the freight trains. How are they going to get over to the hospital? Especially with an ambulance. When you're on the west side of the tracks, we were told the high-speed rail is coming through every 30 minutes. So you have that to contend with. You have the freight trains, and I've read some information where they may add more freight trains to the line, and other people have read this information also. And people on the west side of the tracks, and we have a large population to the west of the tracks, how are they going to get to the hospital? So I'd like to put that out on the table for the board members to think about that. A number of years ago, there was discussion at the MPO to actually go over the tracks with an overpass. So with us talking here, we may have to make some recommendations to the City Council to bring some information over to our local MPO. And for the folks out there that are listening, the MPO is a federal agency, and they're charged with looking over the transportation needs of a city, and also if you have transportation in a city that has an adverse effect. So keep that in the back of your minds as this is moving forward. And the concerns that have come to my ears are pretty serious. People they're worried, especially when you have someone that's between 60 and 80 years old. If they need to get to the hospital and have to wait quite a while, that's a problem. We had a personal situation in our home not too long ago where we had to wait quite a while for an ambulance because there was quite a long train. So I kind of know how it feels a little bit.
I don't know whether
Any
you
other
remember or
matters?
not, Ken, but back, quite a while ago, there was serious discussion when the hospital was over where the county administration building was, and then they moved the new hospital. But when the hospital was on that side, there was serious discussion about putting a bridge over
Right.
to the hospital.
And so as we move forward as a community, again, for the folks to the west of the tracks, not only the ones in the city, but our county friends, we're going to have to put the discussions on the table. What are we going to do? And this is something we're going to have to go further down the road, contact our hospital board here. Maybe we're going to have to think outside the box here in the future where we may have to, if we can't do the overpass, either a medical center on the west side, but it is going to have to be addressed because we do have quite a good-sized population to the west. Any other matters of the commission members?
Didn't Mr. Roberts address this at the last meeting? The length of time that the gates have to be down before the train gets there, and then add to that the length of time that any given fast train is going through town. Didn't you give us an estimated number?
45 seconds.
With the gates and the train, the total time gates are down. Addressing your issue, Mr. Gage, that the amount of time that from the gates going down at a crossing, with the train passing and the gates going back up to allow traffic.
Mr. Roberts, if you would.
The most often quoted figure that I've been given is somewhere 45 seconds or less, so less than 45 seconds. It depends, obviously, the size of the intersection and
Right.
that type
And then
of
I
thing.
think that the other issues, being that this commission is addressing the high-speed rail, the other question would really be pertinent to the freight, because that is much longer, and that's probably what you endured.
Right, and also with the gate where the train passes through, let's just use, you said 45 seconds? All right, 45 seconds, but your gates have to come down in advance and the gates have to go up. So there, as that train is coming through, we're going to have to take a look.
That's total time
Total?
going down and up.
Down and up,
Yes, sir.
okay.
And I've been at the train tracks with the freight train for 45 minutes
I understand.
in the city.
Any other questions?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Yeah, two issues, I guess, for members. One, not to make more work for the city attorney or the commission, but I think as we go forward, whether we vote for or make a suggestion to do quiet zones or not, I think we also have to ask the question of whether we are going to suggest to the city that they put up fencing along this corridor, independent of quiet zones or not. And so that would create two issues, one an aesthetic issue and a funding issue. I believe that the resolution as written is limited, that we're asking the state to provide funding for the quiet zones. I think whether it's worth redoing a resolution or asking for additional funding for fencing, if that was a possible recommendation. I don't know if the committee cares about that or not. I do believe that fencing is something that we should look at independent of whether we're going to recommend quiet zones or not.
This committee member agrees with you that that's an issue, but is it an issue that's already covered by the by legislation on high-speed railroads? Do you know that, Rusty?
That would actually be a question for our city attorney. He helped draft the resolution.
Well, that's not done. I'm not asking about the
as far as-
resolution.
Are you
It
asking
includes-
if the FRA requires fencing? in
Requires
certain areas?
fencing when you change from a freight train to a high-speed train. Are there requirements to block the? Wayne saying no, he doesn't know, or
No idea.
no idea. Okay.
Practice in that area.
And Rusty,
My only answer to that, Mr. Chairman, is that we are, All Aboard Florida is working with the Federal Railroad Administration and Florida DOT to look where we need to do fencing. Fencing, to my knowledge, is not required along the entire corridor, but there will be places where fencing will be needed, and that obviously is an ongoing study.
Okay, thank you.
And my guess with my interaction with this is that's done by a population count.
Okay.
And but I'll see if we can find somebody that can answer that question.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we're moving to the number 8, next meeting date and time.
can I just back up 1 second? I think that if you listen to all of the questions and all of the concerns that have been expressed here today, and then consider what Don had to say, I think Don's solution resolves all of those questions.
Well, I'd like to add one thing. Based on your other comment about whether our resolution covers us recommending fencing, it does. If you read the resolution, it gives our authority and duties. The commission is hereby authorized and directed to study, report on, and make recommendations to City Council regarding the impacts of the project and high-speed trains on the city, in particular roadways, properties, residents, and businesses along the railway corridor,
I-
including but not limited to consideration of public health and safety, financing of improvements for affected railway crossing, and possible destination quiet zones, etc. So we're talking about the whole.
I completely agree that this commission is charged with that. I think what I was actually trying to refer to, and maybe I wasn't very clear, is this, the city commission's action last night and asking for state funding regarding quiet zones is unfortunately limited to that. And again, I'm not, I'll defer to the city attorney as to whether we need to reopen that door or if the city were to feel comfortable with that resolution, giving them the ability to ask the legislature for money regarding funding.
And you make some very valid points, and if you would please, for the next meeting, if you would put your thoughts down on paper and let us see those thoughts so we could take a look at this and send it to the council to add it to the resolution to make a new one so we can look at some funding.
Sure.
So, thank you. Next meeting date and time. Would you like to meet in 2 weeks?
I'm always happy to
Good.
speak
2
about it.
weeks is
I
fine.
have a problem as like I say, I'm going to be out of town for 3 weeks. I'll be back. I can't make a meeting in 2 weeks, but I can certainly make a meeting in 4. And I have no problem with, you want to meet. I'm just going to be out of the
Just
country.
make sure that we alert Scott.
Yeah, just make sure your alternate
Yeah.
would come in. But I do have that trip, which is planned for a long time.
I'm available in 2 weeks.
Sure.
If
Wait.
possible, I prefer the 4 o'clock start, whether we do it Wednesday or
Did you
Thursday.
say 4?
Please.
We agreed as
That's fine.
a group to do 4, and we're going to stick with the 4 o'clock.
Tammy, that works with you, that date?
No.
No,
It
okay.
does not work with the council chambers.
Give us
Um,
something close
How
to
about
2
the
weeks.
following day, Thursday?
Thursday does not work either. We could do Friday or Monday of that week, or we could look at the next week.
So you're looking at the week of the 3rd, Tammy?
Yes.
I would suggest we plan more than one meeting ahead.
Good plan.
If we're going to meet every 2 weeks, we should look and see if we get gates. Like I'll be back in country on the 18th of February, so I can meet on the 19th or later. And from then out, that's the last trip I'm taking for a while, so then it doesn't make any difference. But I just want to let that in there. So the second meeting should be the 19th or later if you want my attendance.
There are a lot of meetings going on in the council chambers. We do have the training room upstairs if we need to meet up there.
I think we should stick to a schedule, recognizing that certain people are just not going to be able to make it.
I concur.
So, Madam Clerk, are you saying during the week of the 3rd through the 7th, there is no availability of this chambers at 4 o'clock?
There is on Monday the 3rd or Friday the 7th.
But you say the training room is available.
The training room is available.
I think
I-
I would
If,
recommend that we stay with a Wednesday.
well, I would prefer to have the meetings taped and televised so we have a record for the general public. The training room, we do not have the facilities to do the TV taping.
So that defers to the 3rd?
Third?
Monday?
That's fine with me.
Monday the 3rd. Monday the 3rd it is at 4 o'clock. Okay, we set the next meeting date and time. Any other business? Okay.
Yes, I would suggest we schedule a few more meetings after that at 2-week intervals so we can find out when the chamber's available so we know when we can meet here.
All right.
Madam Clerk, what is the availability between the 17th and the 21st?
We have one day that week, and that would be on Monday the 17th.
I'm not available.
Or will I be for that matter? It is.
How about the week after that?
It is President's Day.
The week after that looks really good, except for Tuesday. Any day is available.
I'm not available Monday.
So, Mr. Chairman, would you like to move back to the Wednesday or Thursday regarding the 26th or 27th?
Sure, if that works for everybody.
The 26th?
And then we're back on the Wednesday schedule, 2:26. And that's at 4?
Yes, we're going to keep it at 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then in keeping with what Peggy had to say and others on scheduling something in advance, 2 weeks after that is Wednesday the 12th. What's Tammy look like on Wednesday the 12th?
I'm in Tallahassee at that time.
Yeah, we have a meeting that week. It's good on the 10th, the 13th, or the 14th.
13th is Thursday?
13th is Thursday, yeah.
I'm away the 12th, 13th, and 14th in Tallahassee during that week.
So we have, I mean, we have some conflicts with one member here and there, but generally speaking, the 13th is available. So, Mr. Chairman, do you want to do that?
I'm good.
And that's at 4?
It's all good for me
Is that far enough in advance for everyone
Yep.
at this point?
at this point, yeah.
We all good?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion for
Before
adjournment.
before you entertain adjournment, city managers here, you have anything that you want to add or no? And just for the record, Tammy, we had one council member here for most of the meeting. I don't know whether she stepped out to the bathroom or whatnot, but if the minutes could just reflect her interest in the meeting and that she was here. And for the public, it was
Graves.
Ms. Graves. Mental blank, sorry, old age.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got it.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.